you, Senator Rector and committee that signed in here. I didn't intend to testify today, so I don't have written testimony. The reason that I decided to
stand at the mic, please, and identify yourself.
My name is Troy Haines. I am from Mapleton, Maine. I come from a logging family. Actually, Shelley, who I'll never get used to calling Shelley, but Chicky is my cousin. As a matter of fact, some of the most treasured memorabilia my family has is items including old video of my grandfather on the log floats when they build the dam every year, cover the lake and the lumber on the ice, wait for the ice to go out below the dam, and they'd get up with their pick poles and they'd float, they'd ride the logs on top of the logs down to the towns. We had a rich heritage at one point in northern Maine of that. I'm chiefly testifying for a couple of reasons. One is it became very clear to me that although there are many, many loggers here today, many of them won't testify for the fear of reprisals that a lot of us feel. Two, I've lived in northern Maine for 32 years, and I've seen what's happening there, and I wanted to respond to a couple of things very quickly. I am a small business owner, by the way. I own a meat cutting business. I own the second largest processor of moose in the state. And I just want to address a couple of things. And this has been touched on, so I'm just going to hit it really quick. But with this map, I want to show something to the committee here, something that I've seen over the course of my life. Yeah, I'll put it back up.
Troy, here, you just use this because I think you can probably...
Well, I actually want to show you.
Well, we've all got copies of it, so you can...
Yeah.
Okay, I'll put it back there. This is the area where we're talking about most of the bonded labor occurring. This is also the area where you're seeing no development, no mills. These are the areas where there have been mills. Many, many, many mills, especially through here. And even at the beginning of my life, those mills were there and operating, and they've gone away as you've seen more and more finished product being trucked in from Canada. They come, they cut, they take it back to mills. If they showed the Canadian mills, and I think that it would be a great visual to use, you'd see that they dock directly along our border, waiting for that infusion of our timber. So we talk now about where
I'd like it if you speak,
sure,
Mr.
I'll put
Haynes,
this back
at the microphone, just because there are people in the listening audience who can't hear when you're standing away from it, so that would be great.
We talk now about the situation that we find ourselves in and why we need to continue supporting this practice. If we had had a conversation that was forward-looking when we began some of these practices, we would still have strong infrastructure, we would still have strong industries, we would not have a severely economically depressed area, which is where I come from and what I love. A little bit of background, I am the chair of the Aroostook County Democrats. I also ran for the state legislature in District 7. My opponent is in the room, he's here to testify with me today, and I'm very proud of him for that, so thank you very much, Alex. We get along fine. I wanted to speak to a couple of things that I see every day. The first, and one of the most important, I think, is that we're currently looking at 34 bonds in the state. I can tell you of days that I've spent on Route 11 and I've seen more than 30 Canadian log trucks go by in one area. So we're talking about 34 reported bonds. I'm going to throw one statistic out for you. The last statistic the Department of Labor has when bonded labor did collect unemployment, which was over a year ago, when we've heard that there were about twice as many bonds, they collected $500,000 that year. If you consider that the maximum amount and collected it for 2 months, that would be over 200 laborers collecting unemployment for 2 months at $356 a week in the state of Maine. Yet we've only got 60 reported bonds. So we need to understand the difference between reported bonds and what's actually going on. At the time when the van went off the St. John Bridge, there were only a handful of reported bonds. When the Department of Labor went in, they found exponential bonds over what had been reported. Literally dozens and dozens of times as many bonds as had been reported at that point. That's an important thing to think about. We're talking about the amounts of bonds are here, not that are reported, not necessarily that are there. We also heard that we have these rules that we have to play by. What this bill is talking about is removing any requirement to play by those rules. So I see an issue there. I own a small meat cutting plant. I hire from a labor pool that I have access to. I want to point out a couple of things. If there was a cheaper labor pool for me to hire from that was satellite to me, if I didn't have a strong ethical obligation or that I felt to the people that I work with, it would be very easy and expedient for me to increase my profits by going to that labor pool, especially if there's no oversight of that practice. But more importantly, if I want to hire a moose skinner and I can't find one, I have to teach somebody to skin a moose. And that's another issue that we need to address here. What we're hearing is we can't put qualified workers together with the jobs. Well, I can tell you something. I see an awful lot of qualified workers in this room who have spent a lot of downtime while other people were taking those jobs who were not from our country. What we're not addressing here is if we have a well-trained, well-qualified workforce in Canada that does it cheaper, and we can't put somebody into that job because they don't have the skill set, as long as we continue doing things the way we're doing them, we're never going to fix that problem. And eventually there will be no qualified laborers in Maine and plenty of qualified laborers, and we'll just continue to see the exacerbation of this issue. That's something that I really wanted to touch on. The real issue, though, that I see is I see Canadian logging trucks coming in and going out with our resource. I see hardworking people who I care very much for sitting by idly watching their livelihood go away, and I see a lot of deference to that in some people, and I see it being exploited in others in the name of continued profit. And we have to think systemically about what's good for our economy, and what's good for our economy is putting Maine people back to work, and they're there. We need to keep them working.
Thank you, Mr. Haines. Are there questions? Representative Tuttle.
Yeah, I noticed, Senator, that we have a number of legislators.
I'm going to ask the legislators to speak. I'm going to run the 3-minute clock on them, though, and we're going to begin as soon as Mr. Haines is done. So if we limit our questions, they'll get up here more quickly. Any questions? Representative Gilbert.
Just to say thank you for being here, and you are very well spoken.
Thanks.
Yep, indeed. Representative Herbig.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You brought up a really interesting point that I hadn't thought about yet in this conversation. You were talking about, oh, well, if I can't find a moose skinner, I train somebody. Are you seeing a lot of, I'm assuming there's a younger population in where you live, are you seeing that sort of younger generation going into logging?
Well, very briefly I'll touch on this because I don't want to take up much time. I know that Chase Jackson's in the room here somewhere. And he might go into logging someday. I know that Chickie's son might go into logging someday, but those are people who have the advantage of having a family business. If I decided I wanted to go into logging, it's not going to happen because where I don't have the training, I can't get that job if you can hire a qualified professional from across the border. I recently helped with a study on the age of beef farmers in the state of Maine. The study said that the age has gone, and this is applicable, but I'll be 30 seconds. The age of the average beef farmer has gone to 50, from 32 in the last 50 years. The size of the average herd has gone from 300 to 80, and the number of farmers in Maine has gone from hundreds to a handful. Therefore, we don't need processing facilities for beef in the state of Maine. That was what the report came back as. And I went back to him and said, no, you have this backwards. We don't have the infrastructure. We don't have the support in the state. So people are going out of business. They can't stay in the family business. They can't maintain that culture and heritage that they've appreciated and belonged to for so long. And we're seeing that because of unlawful accessing of the H-2A program. We're losing our culture. We're losing our economy.
Representative Wintle, you have a question?
Point of order. Let's press on, please.
Representative Driscoll.
Good afternoon. Do you know if there are any wood harvesting programs in northern Maine associated with the community college system, or are there any training programs specifically for wood harvesting? Are there any companies, private companies, that are invested in the people in northern Maine with respect to wood harvesting?
There's a program through that the professional logging contractors of Maine who are out of New Gloucester are involved with. I think if you talk to a lot of loggers in northern Maine, they would take exception to the program because they feel it's more about certification and less about gaining skills. So there is a real need for infrastructural support, I think, in our industry.
Any follow-up, Representative?
So a lot of the folks who are filling in the jobs that are available to you that you can find, are they getting their skills more through on-the-job training type of experience rather than a formal educational process?
Right. Particularly if you continue creating a system that rewards accessing a skilled labor pool from across the border. And frankly, I had a landowner say to me the other day, you got to leave these programs. You got to leave them alone. I can get a Canadian guy to cut it for 35 a cord. The American guy is going to charge 40. So when you have that situation, you have New Brunswick or Quebec who's creating qualified laborers. You have an incentive to hire those laborers because there's no enforcement in the H-2A program in Maine. You have no way to create continued qualified laborers. So down the road, we're looking at a bigger problem. But right now, the problem is we have qualified loggers who are sitting idle a lot of the time, not just mud season, but a lot of the time when other people are taking the jobs. The idea that there aren't, the workforce isn't there is frankly not